Everyone. My name is Anustup Naik. I lead the classroom instruction and practice team at the Central Square Foundation. I'm very excited to have a really star cast of experts today. And I can see that we've already crossed 100 people who are watching. I can't see any one of you, but a warm welcome to this conversation, which I hope will throw a lot of light on what we are facing right now. Without much ado, I just wanted to get started. But before I do, I was just thinking about this recent time that we are going through, and this few lines from The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens came to my mind. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. These are really, really, really interesting times that we are in, not just for us as professionals, but for entire society. And certainly for a group who is often forgotten, but now in the limelight, India's 6.5 million teachers who are teaching in our schools. And today's session is really dedicated to them. As the COVID epidemic imposes unprecedented asks on our education system, what does this mean for our teachers, who are really the front line of education workers, and they're balancing all kinds of demands? The need for re-enrolment for children, their socio-emotional well-being, engagement of these children returning to school, and not to mention their academic learning when things are really tough. How should this education system respond to these needs of supporting our teachers? And really, what does teaching look like? And what would teachers look like in this new environment that we are going to face? And these are some opening thoughts. And we have with us a very interesting group of people, most of whom I have known for many years and some who I have begun to know recently. I just wanted to quickly introduce our panelists. Dr. Dheet Jangran, who is the founder, director of Language and Learning Foundation, which is doing some excellent work in foundational learning in several Indian states. Sridhar Rajgopalan, co-founder and chief learning officer of Education Initiatives and one of the foremost experts on assessment in our country. Ramya Venkatraman, founder and CEO of the Center for Teacher Accreditation, and Vinod Karate, founder and CEO of the Teacher App, both of whom work very closely on the ground with teachers. So welcome once again, and I hope to get a few opening comments from all of you to start with, before we sort of deep dive into your individual areas, which I'm very, very curious about. So I want to start with all of you, if you can make a quick remark on something that could inform us. What is the one big worry that you have, and the one big opportunity that you see for teachers teaching in this time? And also, while you're commenting on it, maybe if you could throw a light on what are one or two things that your organization has done differently, and has anything positively surprised you? Maybe I'll start with Ramya to kick things off.
Sure. So let me maybe start with the opportunity before the worry, since we are hearing about worries most of the time these days. So the big opportunity that we are seeing from our vantage point is that teaching competencies are really coming to the forefront. So as an organization, what we primarily try to do is assess and certify the competencies of teachers and connect them to a range of opportunities based on those competencies. And then on the other side, support their professional development along those competencies. And so far, teaching competencies was always this, somewhat abstract thing understood by a certain number of teachers, principals, people in the education sector maybe. And as far as the broader society was concerned, teaching, I mean, on one end, people look at it as, oh, it is an easy job, anyone should be able to do it. It is not the preferred career that I'm going to ask my son or daughter to pursue. And on the other hand, there'll be people who are like, I have no clue what it looks like, and I cannot even think about it. And now I think somewhere we have started seeing society engaging more on what the meaning of teaching competencies is, because of teachers becoming live in every living room, study room, bedroom, wherever your device is kept. And you as a parent starting to see that, oh, this teacher is actually doing a pretty good job and this teacher is not. And for me, that's a unique opportunity for teachers with great competencies to differentiate themselves in a broader ecosystem, to get rewarded for those competencies, to see career growth based on those competencies and that merit. And very interestingly, this whole situation has become a very interesting kind of catalyst for the fundamental mission that we are pursuing, which is that great teachers should get rewarded. Now, the worry on the other side is, I think a lot of the discussion today is on this theme of online teaching, and which is no doubt very important. And again, as CENTA itself, and you asked what our organizations are doing as well. So as CENTA itself, for example, we have launched a variant of our test called CENTA Teaching Quotient, dedicated to online teaching. We are launching a short course for people to ramp up rapidly on their online teaching capabilities and get certified for it, and so on. So there is a certain focus on online teaching, but the underlying understanding of the subject, understanding of pedagogy, understanding of how children learn, being able to see a class and engage with it, being able to understand whether a class is engaged or not, these are things that you carry from your physical world to the online world. So teachers and schools and systems which are seeing this more as a transition from one medium to another, we are finding them to be far more successful compared to people who are saying, oh, this is a completely new thing I need to do. And it's actually okay if I don't know my subject, or if I don't understand student assessment or pedagogy, but what I need to understand is how Zoom works or how Google Hangouts works. So that's the worry, that when we talk about online teaching, we should not miss out the teaching in the phrase, and only focus on the online part of the phrase. So that's broadly what I would say to start out with.
No, it's a great point, Ramya, and starting off thankfully with a upbeat mood. It's really troubling times, but I think I do relate to the point that you made, that very often when we speak about ed tech, ed is usually small and tech is usually large. In that, I think we need to flip that a little bit. Over to Dheer. Dheer, are you as upbeat as Ramya is? Are you as optimistic? And I mean, I don't need to lead you down a different path, but what are your thoughts? Where are you in this? And where is your organization, which is obviously in the front lines of all of this?
Thanks, Anastu. Uh, Basically, we believe in the centrality of the teacher to bring about change in the classroom processes. I mean, any transformation has to happen in every single classroom, and the teacher has to do that. And our experience of the last 5 or 6 years has shown very clearly that given a good enabling environment, many or most teachers are actually willing to learn and bring about that change. And we've seen that in several states. So we're generally very upbeat about teachers. This is a difficult situation. The risk is this, that teachers will be under pressure to be, let's say, completing the syllabus quickly, and when schools reopen, an increased focus on, let's say, rote memorization or lower order procedural kind of skills. So that there are risks, but I think the opportunity we see is this, that good teachers can actually adapt to these difficult times where there is a multi-grade, multi-level learning situation. There is a truncated instructional time, and innovate to see how they can ensure children's learning. But at the organizational level, what we've been implementing what are called blended distance learning courses for a long time, where there's some face-to-face, some print materials, mentors for every 25 participants, audio conference calls, assignments, tasks, time to go and practice in schools. We have recently begun to implement pure online courses, and we do that as a 5-week online course on early language and literacy. And there are about 45,000 teachers who are undergoing the course in Chhattisgarh right now. We're also implementing it for teachers who are part of some of our early learning programs. And since you wanted me to point out something positive, I must say this is an example of a teacher in a remote part of Rajasthan in Dungarpur district. And she writes back to us to say, she'd done a face-to-face program with us earlier. She writes back to say, in this 5 weeks, I've had more time to reflect, respond, and look at how I was teaching earlier. And she sent us pictures of several posters that she's made that she wants to put up in the classroom once she's back, which remind her of the pedagogy of how do you use children's languages in the classroom. So if for her, it was a very different experience from the face-to-face 4 days, rushed training program. But of course, she had undergone that program earlier. So this was building on it. From the Chhattisgarh program, which has about 45,000 teachers, the interesting part is this, that 55 to 60% teachers, these includes head teachers and cluster coordinators as well, are likely or on the way to complete the course. About 100 of them who we spoke to say that this course has whetted our appetite, but we want more discussion and dialogue and interaction on some of these issues that face us in the classrooms. So many of them are seeing this as an entry point. But overall, I think we've been really enthused by the response of teachers in the past couple of months. And it just shows that given the right environment and right support, we could see a lot of changes in the teaching learning process in the coming months and years.
No, that's very heartening, and especially the story you shared, because often there is this narrative that teachers are not really interested in their own learning. They're really not motivated, and no matter what you do in terms of bringing new courses or resources to them, they're really not interested. And I think this is a very different set of stories that are coming out from the field, and that gives me a good chance to go to Vinod. Vinod. I mean, one way to look at it is that for the last couple of years, you've been building a digital platform to educate, or as I would say, to re-educate teachers. I do know that things are very, very tough for everyone, but was this the moment that you were waiting for in terms of adoption, or how are things looking on the ground, and anything else that you want to share at a high level? What's the uptake? Be very curious to hear.
No, I think, let me flip it. I'll start with the worry first and then talk about the opportunity. I think at a macro level, we all have seen what's happened post RTE for the last 15, 18 years. I think we've pretty much shortchanged our teachers at every single point. We've hardly prepared them for massive changes. So we adopted NCF, progressive curriculum, but we have not spent enough time in building capacity of teachers. And Ramya will point out that pedagogy content knowledge is one of the biggest gap that we see in our teachers. And that's been the exploration starting 2016. How do we ensure that progressive ideas, research, and discussion reach teachers directly without any cascade? My big worry is that we're going to lose a lot of ground on that, because we always hear about student learning outcome problem. And Rukmini, top of the chart today, told about that there is a high risk that we may have certain enrollment dropouts happening. I see that a lot of good organizations, which over the last 15 years have built this unique case of spending more energy and time in building teacher capacity, we will start losing ground, because suddenly the state system will be focused on how to pivot into a more blended digital point, and we will continuously burden our teachers and not necessarily prepare them. Classic case being some states overnight becoming English medium, for example, without necessarily thinking how would our teachers cope with it. CCE is one such great example of a great idea being killed because teachers are not adequately supported. So that's my big worry, that I think we'll lose significant ground in terms of the rhetoric of that teachers need a lot of support, especially in India, because the health of our teachers as far as their own professional readiness to deliver high quality training is not adequate. And we'll lose, we will not have adequate voices supporting that, because focus suddenly will be students. In terms of opportunity, I think we are riding on a classic ambulance chase at this point of time. If you're going through tough traffic and suddenly you have an ambulance in front of you and start chasing it, you will suddenly cross a lot of red light very quickly, and you'll feel that you covered a lot of distance, and that's precisely what's happening to us. And I'll share numbers to say how exciting this is. Clearly, we made a very quick pivot the moment lockdown happened in terms of having a two-platform strategy. We mirrored all our content on Diksha and then went to state governments. And 8 state governments almost looked at this as a no-regret move, that engage teachers using teacher app content to train themselves while they are locked down. So all state governments have moved out and created different plans, some very aggressive, some very less aggressive. But there are plans in place where teachers are spending 3 to 4 hours a week learning using our content. Collectively, over the last 4 weeks, we have just crossed 1 million users across Teacher App and Diksha accessing our content. All crude numbers are looking very promising. So if we were getting a daily users of around 1,200 on my app, I don't have a view on what's happening on Diksha. We'll get to know hopefully in 2 weeks' time. But at least on my app in the last 4 weeks, everything is 5 times. So we used to get 1,200 teachers, now we get 6,000 a day. We used to get around 30,000 teachers average coming back in a month. We're getting around 50,000 in a week. Our rough estimate is even if the compliance to the plans that 10% teachers, that if 100 teachers are told to do this, 10 does it, we are talking about roughly 35 million hours of learning happening till September. That's a huge opportunity to see what happens when high quality content marries teachers at that scale. I think we would definitely go down and see what happens in September once we look at that data. That's a lot of learning there. And one big, huge case is that there is need to create high quality content for teachers is also going to bubble up. And that's what's exciting. The case to kind of spend and invest in creating high quality content, especially for teachers, is going to stay. And that's a huge opportunity for us.
Oh, that's helpful, and I'm going to come back to your ambulance chase in a minute. But before that, I want to get Sridhar into the conversation. Sridhar, I mean, I have seen you as a very, astute observer of what's happening in the Indian education ecosystem, not just the government one, but also the private one. And you've been also a sharp observer of the data that is coming out from children's learning. So from that standpoint, from your vantage point, both as an entrepreneur, but also as an observer and a student of the ecosystem, where do you see the opportunities and also the threats right now?
Yeah, no, thanks, Anutup. I think it's a good way of looking at the worries or the threats along with the opportunities. I would look at the biggest worry or the biggest threat is that something that we always tend to do gets even more intensified, which is short-termism, right? So like whether it's private schools or government, so the short-term need was, have some visibility of learning, start online classes, give something for children to start off, do something on WhatsApp, and as this extends, that short-termism will probably, the risk is that will extend. And this is a problem that we have always faced. I mean, Vinod talked about states going English medium, not just overnight, but even earlier. So that to me is the biggest threat that, we look at this and we say, because of this situation, we have to do this now. And then whether or not it makes sense, because we have to respond to something immediate, we do this. And that's the worry. The opportunities, I see 2 or 3 opportunities. One is clearly a leapfrogging opportunity, right? I mean, if in the normal course of time for us to accept digital as also a medium of learning, whether it's for teachers or students, was following its own pace. And probably what would have happened in 5 or 10 years, I think, is, and obviously this is a very emotional and a difficult, I don't know whether it's a moment, it's a few months or a few years. But because of this, that experience will actually be more kind of seared into people's minds. So in that sense, I think this leapfrogging is a very significant positive. The second example we give is that, doctors, when doctors are serving their patients, they are backed up by a huge science of medicine that they not just, refer to, but have to refer to and have to stay in touch with. somehow in our existing system, we kind of leave it to the teachers and say, why are the teachers not doing all this? And isn't it obvious that this is what they have to do? And haven't they cleared all these classes themselves so they know everything? This whole piece of supporting teachers with a science of learning, the way that we kind of continuously support doctors, was not there in the system. So both as a time to provide that, but also as technology as the platform to support teachers in that way, I think there's the opportunity that we recognize that and we move ahead with that. From our organization's perspective, I think the most interesting thing has been that across schools, both private and government, we have about 750 different WhatsApp groups with teachers, and it's been like amazing to see the kind of, so in a lot of these things, it starts with something related to our product. So it would be an asset assessment or MindSpark learning, but very quickly it goes into the deeper questions on learning, on math teaching, or how are children struggling in language, or what is the kind of help they need. And just having these kinds of groups, I mean, I hear our teams and, they at times obviously get like really stressed and drained out, but they also find it really enthusiastic, and they give a lot of examples of the kind of participation and how teachers are participating in this enthusiastically. So numbers, I think as Vinod mentioned, in our case, it is primarily students, where there was a tenfold in the, the retail. So one of the things we did was we have always made our private school products available on the net directly for students, but never done this with government schools, where it would always happen through the government system and we would have a server there and so on. So here we got a request, and then so we opened up MindSpark Telugu, MindSpark Gujarati, and these are being used. It's being used mostly on the mobile phone. They are ideally meant for use on the computer, but they're being used in the mobile phone. And the surprising thing is, and the positive thing is, we've not heard any complaints about the fact that they don't have a device or it's not working on this device. So I think that has been a truly gratifying thing, and we realized that we should have done this earlier. So yeah, so I think a mix of risks and opportunities, and we hope we kind of jump on the opportunities when they're there.
No, that's very interesting. And there's almost this groundswell of interest and motivation for learning, which was waiting to find a route, and it's find a channel. And this relates to the next question that I was thinking of. I just, before I was getting on this call, I received a WhatsApp forward from a friend. And this was a surgeon who was responding to this spate of, this is a surgeon who is a child surgeon who does surgery on a child, but he was speaking more as a parent. And the point he was making was that there's a lot of parents now being able to see teaching, right? Because they're seeing teachers teach their children, which is an unprecedented experience, right? The classroom was like a bedroom, you never went there. And obviously many parents, and there is always two responses. One is that how grateful I am for this teacher taking out the time for my child. But obviously there's lots of criticisms on teachers, on how ill-prepared they are and so on and so forth. And I'd like to sort of go back and maybe ask, now Ramya is also doing a lot of work on teacher competencies, and others feel free to chime in as well. Now, if I'm a teacher, what are the top 2 or 3 competencies that I need to have to really succeed in this new environment? I mean, I don't want to get into the debate whether teachers are doing a good job or a bad job, but suppose I want to succeed. What are the 2, 3 things you would pick? And I'd also like to hear a little bit from others if you want to add on.
Sure. So broadly, I would say there are 4 or 5 competencies which are quite important in this environment. An understanding of technology goes without saying, but a more sort of a granular, practical understanding of what are the tools out there, what are the purposes for which they are relevant, what are the pros and cons of different tools, how do you practically use them in a classroom or in a remote teaching mode. So it's not just online teaching, but it's remote teaching more broadly. How do you use them for assessments, sections, etc., etc. So that's one set of competencies, understanding of the technology tools. The second big competency that we see, and this is true in the physical world and the online world, is understanding of my domain itself. So understanding of my subject or the domain that I'm trying to teach. And interestingly, in the scores of both center teaching quotient and center teaching quotient for online teaching, subject understanding continues to be one of the big gaps in terms of the challenge that a teacher is facing. So subject understanding continues to be an important competency. Uh, Third is, if you look at what are broadly called pedagogical practices, and we broadly divide them into content and planning, student assessment and remediation, and classroom management. But if you look at these three big pedagogical practices, the new environment essentially requires you to start understanding how each of these three things works in an online mode. So what are the tools I can use for lesson planning? What should my lesson plan include in a manner that it can work online? What kinds of student assessment can happen, cannot happen? How do I check for understanding of every student? How do I keep the class engaged, etc.? So for each of these, how do they work in an online mode? And finally, the other thing that we are also seeing quite a lot is teachers' ability to understand the social emotional side of the child and be able to support that, because mental health is clearly becoming a significant challenge on the ground in this period for children, for adults. And as a teacher, how do I support my own mental health, and how do I support the mental health of the students and pick up red flags is the other significant competency we see. And incidentally, this is the range of competencies we are capturing in this new certification that I was mentioning, where we are rapidly preparing teachers for this environment and certifying them. So these are the main ones that I would talk about.
No, I'm happy you are doing that, and like I was telling you yesterday, that I would like to recertify myself. I have been an old world teacher trainer, and mostly a face-to-face kind of a person, and that brings me to something that Dheeran and I were chatting about. And the one is what kind of a teacher you really want to be, but how do you get teachers there? So we need to talk about professional development. So we've experienced this kind of almost three models right now, right? There's a whole professional development of teachers model, which is direct in a workshop format, in a classroom format. There is perhaps another one which is more distance learning mode. And now of course you have a pure online mode. And Dheer, you've been on the front lines of professional development, and Vinod also. I'd love to hear from you that what's the essential difference in the training of these teachers? Is there something that you are seeing? Are the training practices the same, or are there some essential differences on the best practice?
Right. So as you said, we've actually worked with all these three modes. What we find in the face-to-face mode to be an advantage is that there's scope for discussion, dialogue, debate, building conviction, because a lot of what we have to work on, especially as we work in early grades, is in the realm of attitudes and beliefs. It's about how do you include children's languages, let's say, how do you allow children to speak, ask higher order questions. A lot of this gets really resolved when you're able to work with teachers face to face. Of course, face to face done badly is really a big challenge, and that's happened. For example, I don't know how many of people attending this session have had a chance to attend a Nishtha session which happened last year, which was a centralized training all over the country for some 40 lakh teachers. This was like a pravachan. एक गुरु जो है वो प्रवचन दे रहे हैं और सब लोग सुन रहे हैं उनको और बाद में प्रसाद लेके चले जाते हैं. Now, the point is that obviously face-to-face training, if it has to be effective, has to be done very differently. But yes, it is resource intensive and of course takes away teachers from classroom time. The blended mode is where we work the most. It gives teachers, as I said, it includes a lot of mentoring, audio conference calls, classroom practice, assignments, etc. It gives teachers time to practice, reflect, and also have peer interaction. And it's brought very good results. Our courses are always oversubscribed, and teachers are wanting to do those. But of course, replicability, if we were to do that for 100,000 teachers or 1 million teachers, there is a limitation, because it does involve a mentor who does guidance and interaction with teachers. Our experience with purely online is about 2 months old. I think it has serious limitations. It can help build knowledge. It can help a teacher who's actively looking out for a solution. The teacher is motivated and is looking out for what's out there that I can use to change my classroom. Definitely useful for that. But otherwise, if there are no expectations or demands of teachers who are doing those courses, completion and certification could actually just become an end in itself. So what my feeling is this: we should work towards continuous professional development that uses a mix of these strategies. We know that a lot of online work is useful. Some peer interaction is useful, and also some face-to-face where people can come and debate. So trying to extend the learning experience of teachers for the full year, including WhatsApp and other modes of sharing resources, and with the backdrop of expectation of what change is to come in the classroom. Unless that exists, just consuming training programs through online modes is not going to make much of a difference. So that's my thought, that bring the best out of these and string it together as continuous professional development over the course of the year.
No, that's helpful. And that's a good point too. There's some very good audience questions. I don't know if we can get to answer all of them, but some of them are very interesting. And I'll try to see if I can throw some of them here, and then all of us could try to answer them as we sort of go along. So there is someone who's asking us that how do we it sounds a bit philosophical, but it's a fundamental question, that can parents and children respect education without first respecting their teachers? Because, and why I asked this question, I would normally not ask this question in a short time frame panel discussion, because right now the act of teaching is becoming very, very public. So while this is also the ambulance moment, as Vinod said, it's also putting teachers a lot out there. Maybe if anyone has anything to say on that and jump in, that's an interesting question.
I just want to clarify that may not be the case with a lot of our government teachers, because I understand private teachers, they're doing Zoom and Hangout. A lot of our government teachers are just not able to do that. So that's not the kind of exposure. They're not exposed as much the private teachers are. So I just want to bring that clarification, and then, yeah.
Sure.
No, so if I may jump in on that one, yeah, as a general statement, I would very much agree. Parents and students cannot, respect education without respecting the teacher. But I would actually want to make that more specific, because unfortunately in our country, when we say respect the teacher, it connotes 2-3 things. One, sort of just respect the profession in a very abstract manner, like something out there that you don't understand fully, you don't care for fully, but fine, we all respect it. It's an easy thing to say. The other connotation very often is it is a noble profession, and therefore please don't expect anything for doing it. So please don't expect that you should have a great career or good salaries or a great working environment, etc., etc. It's a noble profession. You need to be sort of giving yourself and doing it. So the respect I would want to see for teachers is not that kind of respect. I would want to see respect where parents and students recognize that it is a tough job, recognize that the competencies needed for doing this are many-fold and not easy to deliver on. The people who do a great job of it need to get rewarded commensurately. And we need to think of it like any other profession. So for me, that is what respect would look like. Yeah, the other part of respect would be for the teacher to have full agency on professional development. So to your earlier question on professional development, I think this current situation has also offered a very unique opportunity for teachers to take much more control of their professional development. And in our, again, vantage point, we see that play out in a very interesting manner because we are also a certification trademark that affiliates professional development entities or accredits professional development entities. And we see that playing out on the MyCenter app, where one program will get huge following and another program will not get following at all. And we are very happy to see that playing out because this is not a sort of a leader of a system or school group, etc., saying you need to take this program or not take this program. This is every individual teacher voting with his or her feet that this is the program that makes sense for me.
Sure, sure. Great. And now I'll go to the other extreme, which is I think someone mentioned, I think Vinod mentioned this, that very often we think of when we say online, it's, everybody would have a digital app and all of that. And that's just not true. So on one hand, you're facing a lot of children who really are in the dark, I will say. And the question from Pinky Sebastian is, we work with migrant workers' children. We run preschools for them during this lockdown situation. How can we go ahead to teach them, or what kind of a source is required? And also a related more sort of technical question is from Annie Siddhotam. What role can IVRs, SMS, WhatsApp channels can play? So this whole low tech, what's the role of low tech? And especially Dheer and Vinod, you're sort of on the front line of all of this, right? You're working with teachers and you're working with children who are in communities like this.
Should I go first?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's true that we know that we actually did a study in the past 2 weeks to understand what is the kind of mobile phone penetration as well as internet connectivity. And it is very low, and it is about 10 to 12% in urban and rural areas together. Not just mobile phone, but also connectivity, the phone being charged and usage, etc. We are doing that because there are 10 to 12, 15% parents who can access that. But we're also looking at alternative modes of IVRS, SMS. Also, interestingly, we are trying to reach a lot of workbooks and simple reading books to children. The teachers are actually going to children's homes or going to a central place at the panchayat, and these books have been lying in schools. So what we managed to do is to get a lot of these books to children, and then do some simple parental guidance through SMS or audio messages that go via a link on SMS about what pages can the child do, what stories can the child read if the child is this old, or so I think for us the key is the teacher and the parent engagement. Respect is one issue, but that's been missing. It's been missing because a school is a place where most parents do not engage with. It's a formidable place. So this is the time actually where we can build on a parent and teacher engagement and look at how the school actually, the learning time extends also to the home. Right now, basically, we always work on the school classroom time, and then home is a time where probably nothing is going to happen. It is true of a large number of parents who are daily wage workers. They're not able to give time, but it's time that we look at the school system engaging with parents and ensuring that some work, especially practice kind of work, it can happen at home, but there is a risk attached to it. We should not think that, because this can cause increasing disparity where children have a lot of home support, they come from better resourced, better income families. So it's important to see that the school takes overall responsibility for learning, but is able to talk to parents about what can be done at home, what's the minimum that can be done at home, especially things like read alouds or children completing some exercise books, etc.
Vinod, you want to add something about the whole sort of digital technology bit? Are there elements which are working on the ground?
I mean, it's a big challenge. I think there is no shame in accepting that we've been caught unaware. We're not ready. We're not ready to address it. And sometimes not doing anything is a good thing if you can afford it. But we will all end up doing things, right? Because we have to. I'm seeing this in two phases. I think the first phase was lockdown to summer break. Luckily, our system has a summer break. It's a good breather, time to rethink, re-strategize. That was purely about just engage children somehow, engage parents somehow, throw things at them and see what happens. But I think this summer break will be a good time to regroup and rethink what happens into phase 2, which is post summer break till the time schools open. And phase 3 is going to be very unpredictable. I mean, there are all kind of predictions, right? That schooling will change and everything. But I'm focused on phase 2. I think we need to really think through if we can create products which are not very passive, thrown at children to just watch on screens. We are getting data that there are only one screen for 3 children in a household. There is no learning space, and chances of this screen going out of home is very high now that parents will go out to find jobs while schools are locked down. So there is limited screen time available. So we need to design. One of the things that we're trying to prototype right now is uh, engaging with Google to see if we can get some money to do that. Is to design projects which can engage children for 3 to 4 hours, and which teachers can execute using very limited technology, which is using their phone, voice recorders, cameras. So can't give them continuous learning. I think we can try, but let's accept it. That's difficult while they're stuck at home. But can we create a simple project? So something like one project a week, which children can do using limited resources that they have at home, and can loop back to a teacher using a voice recorder or WhatsApp message, is something that we're thinking of. Something like that is needed. So thumb rule for me, what I have experienced in the last 3-4 years, especially in digital, if you're desperate, don't try to create a product, because you will end up wasting a lot of time and effort and money. It will not distribute. You will make something, you will be happy because you learn, but yeah, you'll blow a lot of money. So don't create content if you're desperate. That's a simple thumb rule, because content creation is a very, very detailed work. It requires time and effort, and yeah, let's not try to solve it because there's a crisis in hand.
No, that's helpful. We have lots of very good questions. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to answer them in person, but if I can request the panelists to see if they could also address some of this on the chat box. I think there's an incredible number of participants, about 200 plus, who are benefiting from this. But I want to start with the last question. I want to point to Sridhar. As a counterpoint to what Vinod said, that now we are in this ambulance chase moment, and things, some things seem to be going just fine. What happens in the post-COVID world? Do you think this level, and this is also something that an audience member has asked, do you think that things are going to remain the same, or are they going to remain different? You know, what are we going to be left with? What's your prediction? I know predicting something in this situation is hard, but if you were to take a bet, where would you take a bet?
Yeah, see, one of the things is that the process of learning, which is actually about certain outcomes that children acquire, whether it is learning outcomes or behavioral or, you know, values, holistic outcomes. Learning is essentially about outcomes. That's what we are interested in. However, learning gets simplified to, you know, processes. So the parent, whether it's in a village or in a city, the parent thinks that the child going through the motions of, you know, going to school, attending class, coming back, doing homework, writing an exam, moving to the next class is learning. So this focus on outcomes being simplified or reduced to a mindless routine is what education has become. Now, COVID has completely shaken that up, right? I mean, people are even asking that, okay, whether it's through WhatsApp or whether it is through online classes, are my children really learning? And this is a question that, you know, was important, is important, and will continue to be important. And I think that is again the opportunity here, that if in case we are able to focus on this fact that, you know, are children learning, what are the skills that we want them to acquire? Is it that they are, you know, we were talking about the previous question, you know, like we have seen interesting cases where children are kind of working in groups using just an audio, where they're kind of in touch, you know, using voice recordings. So something where you're able to develop useful skills, and then some form, even if it is crude, to measure it. And if it's formal learning, kind of measure that more systematically. So I think that the prediction I would make is that we will kind of go to a point where we look at learning as delivering certain outcomes, saying that this is what we were signing up for, and both parents and teachers aligning towards that. So it's a hopeful thing that I think will happen from this crisis.
No, thank you for that hopeful message. And before I close, if I could just get one phrase from each one of you. If I was a teacher today teaching in a government school or even a private school in India, what is the one piece of advice I can get from you? Starting with Dheer, Ramya, Vinod, and Sridhar, quick rapid fire.
I would say focus on actively engaging every child in any learning experience.
Thank you. Ramya?
It's a great time to have a teaching career. So go all out to make it a real career. Build your competence, get rewarded.
Fantastic. Go all out. Vinod?
I would say that, yeah, know your subject, know the nuances of what you teach. Then technology will follow. You can do that even under a tree. So today you have more than the tree with simple things on your phone. So know your subject. I think you will be able to service children much better if you know that. That comes first for a teacher.
Sridhar?
Yeah, I would say the most important factor in a child's learning is the teacher and the teacher's relationship with the child. So know that and so stick through these troubling times.
Fabulous. No, I mean, I think that's a great summary. Engage children, go all out, know your subject, know your child, and I would just say raise the bar of your teaching and close the gap between children. And thank you so much. It was a great learning experience, certainly for me, and I'm sure the audience which is out there has also benefited. I'm really sorry we couldn't accommodate all your questions. If I may request the panelists to please stay on and also address some of the questions on the chat box, that would be fabulous. Thank you again, Sridhar, Dheer, Ramya, and Vinod. And good luck with everything that you're doing. You're making a very big difference, and I want you to know that. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.